No, I don't want it to record right this second.
The same amount of work.
Sorry.
It's the same amount of work to do this for 10 people as it is to do it for 50. So why not open it up for more people to be able to participate? Um, and I'm thrilled to introduce Dina Stander, who made me promise I wouldn't introduce her so that she could introduce herself because she's afraid I might say nice things and embarrass her. So
Sure.
any of you who know her already know those nice things, but I'm going to let her tell you what she wants you to know.
Thank you, Sue. So, hello everyone, and welcome to 4 Feet Under. It's a conversation today about options for disposition of your remains after death. My name is Dina Stander. I'm an end of life navigator with training in chaplaincy and doula care, and a death educator and burial shroud maker. I'm also a board member of the Hospice of the Fisher Home, and I live in Shutesbury. And with me today for the question and answer section is my friend and colleague, Carol Coan. She's an anthropologist and the former president of the Western Massachusetts Funeral Consumers Alliance, and the first person who ever taught me anything about green burial. I want to begin by noting again that this is the first ever program collaboration between Amherst Neighbors and Village Neighbors, which makes it kind of a milestone moment. I've been involved with Village Neighbors as a volunteer for 4 years or so now, and I am so excited that both of our villages have evolved enough to co host an event. So, huzzah for all of us. This is, I hope, only the first of many ways that we can share information and get together as we go forward. And for Amherst folks who are unfamiliar with the village next door, Village Neighbors is a 4 town group with members and volunteers from Shutesbury, Leverett, Wendell, and New Salem. So, welcome everybody. If you are, yeah, Sue.
I just wanted to also say that Amherst Neighbors is a free uh, nonprofit organization providing services and support to help people remain vital and engaged in their homes and to live more fulfilled lives. Um, we do not charge anything for our services. However, if anyone felt compelled to make a donation, they can go to our website and there's a really easy button to click, or they can send me a message in the chat and I'll help them to access that information. Otherwise, I'll
This
be
is
strung up.
same is true for Village Neighbors. Our services are free and we are here. So let us know if you need something. We have the same mission. Um, okay, so if you are good at Zooming, you can leave questions in the chat, and we'll also be looking later on for your waving hands on screen. So don't worry if the chat is complex for you, and you'll still be able to get answers to questions and to participate in the conversation. Today, we're here to talk about options for body care and disposition after death. There are conventional practices, traditional rites, green and greener options, and new things to consider like composting and cremation stones. We have a lot of ground to cover, and really, this is an opportunity to get an overview of what might be available to you locally, and not so locally, because some of the processes we're going to talk about you can't do in Massachusetts yet. But this is also an opportunity to get an overview of of to get an overview to help you with planning ahead so that what you want to happen with your remains is what actually happens. And I'm going to say that again. This is so that what you want to happen with your remains is what actually happens. Perhaps the most important thing that you can do to get what you want is to talk to your loved ones about your choices in advance. We can't just leave written instructions hoping that they're going to be carried out. we need to talk to our people. We need to explain our choices. We need to answer their questions if we've chosen something they don't understand or haven't heard of before. And in some cases, it's very, very important to have a plan B. For instance, my own mother has made arrangements to donate her body to a medical school. I insisted when she told me about this that she inform my brother in advance because I was pretty sure that he was going to have qualms. And what happened was that he was visiting, and she took my advice and they made time for these important conversations. And it turns out he had really big qualms and he really needed to talk to her about it. And because she was able to explain why she wanted that particular disposition, he now feels at peace with her choice because she was also able to hear what his qualms were about. If they hadn't spoken about it, as her designated executor, I would have been in the awkward situation of complying with my mother's wishes in a way that caused my sibling genuine pain. So I'm really happy that by communicating, we were able to avoid that. Meanwhile, I've had to explain to my mom that we need a plan B because the medical school may not need her when the time comes. So it turns out that my assumptions about what my mother's plan B wishes would be were completely off track. And because we talked about it, I got corrected in a way that was really important for her peace of mind and my peace of mind. So again, these conversations may seem awkward, but so what? We know for certain that talking about what to do with the body after death is good for us and good for the folks that we leave behind, even if it makes us all uncomfortable when we bring it up. So I'm going to run through a quick slideshow to give some context for what we're discussing, and then we can dive in um, for your questions and answers. I'm just going to share my screen for the slides. So this cartoon from the New Yorker is all that we're going to say today about before you die. However, it is that we arrive at death's door. We're here to talk today about what happens to the body next. So our first conversation, our first sort of thing to go over, and I'm going to run through all this, and it may be too much information all at once, but we can go back and you can ask me any question, and Carol too. So first, what is a home funeral? Briefly, a home funeral is
I'm
what...
sorry, your screen is not showing all the text.
Oh, I'm sorry. Is that better?
No. Oh, there. Yes. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, no, I'm glad you told me. Thank you for interrupting. That was great. So briefly, a home funeral is what used to be called a funeral, since all funerals took place in the family home. Nowadays, it means choosing to keep a body at home after death, as opposed to having the body immediately picked up by a funeral home. So this is a safe and legal choice for a family to make. Home funerals occur when a loved one is cared for at home after death, giving family time to gather and participate in planning and carrying out after death rituals or ceremonies, preparing the body for burial or cremation by bathing, dressing, and laying out for visitation, keeping the body cool with non-invasive techniques like ice, filing a death certificate and obtaining transport and burial permits. I mean, this gets a little more complex than we need to talk about right here, but it gives you a sense of what's involved in that. And I've wanted to show you a few examples of home funerals and what they look like. Are you seeing this whole picture now?
Yes.
Okay, so this is one example of what you might expect if you were coming as a visitor to a home funeral. And I have a couple of other peeks into home funeral situations. just to give you an idea of what we're talking about, a home funeral usually involves some advanced planning. You want to keep in mind that you can arrange a hybrid combination of family directed care at home and the assistance of your local funeral director for transportation, for cremation, or burial in the earth or at sea, or for composting. Now, no, I was a little early for that. Sorry. The next, oh, these are in the wrong order. Here we go. Okay. So the next slide is a graphic of explaining a thing called alkaline hydrolysis. Alkaline hydrolysis uses water, alkaline chemicals, heat, and sometimes pressure and agitation to accelerate natural decomposition, leaving bone fragments and a neutral liquid called effluent. The decomposition that occurs in alkaline hydrolysis is the same as that which occurs during burial, just sped up dramatically by the chemicals. The effluent is sterile and contains salts, sugars, amino acids, and peptides. There is no tissue and no DNA left after the process completes. This effluent is discharged with all other wastewater, and the process uses less fuel and electricity, than cremation, which is why people are interested in exploring it as an option. Alkaline hydrolysis is available in 15 states in the United States. It's not currently available in New England except for in Maine, as far as I know. And there is a bill in the Massachusetts, before the Massachusetts legislature, to bring this practice here. And it's really a similar, it's not cremation, and it's a, but it is similar in the sense that it reduces the body to sort of crushed bone, and the rest is through the process transformed. I think is the way I want to say that. It's a little complicated. This is what the alkaline hydrolysis machine looks like, so you can have a sense of what a person's remains would go into to have that process happen. I hope I need to. This is not part of my script. This is a lot of. I'm just about to run through a whole lot of disposition processes. I forgot as I was writing this and putting it all together that I was going to be talking to real people, a lot of real people, and you might all have very different reactions to these processes I'm going to show you. Some of it may be some of it you may be really interested in and feel drawn towards. Some of it you might really recoil from. So I want to apologize that I'm just sort of banging through all this information. I understand that some of it is sensitive, and I I don't even have words for this actually. Okay, so the next process we're going to talk about is cremation. This is what it looks like inside a modern crematory from the business end rather than from the viewing end. Cremated remains are commonly oops, I missed something again. Hold on. Cremation reduces the body to its essential elements through a process that exposes it to open flames, intense heat, and evaporation. This takes place in a specially designed furnace called a cremation chamber or retort. Many crematories require a container for the body, such as a casket appropriate for cremation or a rigid cardboard container. The container you see in the picture is one of these cardboard containers. Cremated remains are commonly referred to as ashes, However, in reality, they consist primarily of burned bone. It is important to recognize that the body's cremated remains are commingled with any remains of the container and any other incidental byproducts of the incineration. So, if the body was wearing clothing, that kind of thing. And this is a graphic that really shows what the cremation process is from the time the body is identified, prepared, placed in a cremation container, moved into flames, and it shows you that it's 1400 to 2000 degrees for 1.5 to 2 hours. The process of using the magnet to pull out any metal that may have been in the cremated remains, and then what they do for preparing remains to return to the family. There are also things we can do now with cremated remains, and a lot of this is really new. Cremated remains are not environmentally friendly, and if you place them under a tree, they do not provide nutrition and can burn the roots. Released in water, they are a very basic element and not great for the ecosystem. And if you bury them in a specifically slow leaching biodegradable urn, they will release more slowly and less harmfully into the environment. And there are some new offerings that give even more options. Cremation stones, which is what are in this bowl here, are new to the funeral products market and are made from cremated remains mixed with a liquid and solidifying agent and hand-shaped and kiln-fired so that when you receive back a package, they look something like this. And this is what they look like on the ground, so you can have a sense of this was actually a burial of cremation stones at a family plot. Rather than putting them in an urn, they decided to keep some of the stones and put some of the stones in the family plot with her parents. So you can see it offers some flexibility. Cremation stones are this, and then there's also other ways of you can turn yourself into a beautiful planet. You can contribute yourself to an ocean reef to help. You can contribute your remains to help build an ocean reef. You can shoot cremated remains out into space, or you can use them in components of this kind of thing, a planet or jewelry that you can wear and have with you always. Another option for disposition of remains after death is a sea burial, which I was really curious to find this photo because I had never participated in a sea burial, and this was really interesting to me. So burial at sea is one of our options, but to coordinate the disposition of your remains, it's important to make plans in advance. So there are boat captains in New England who specialize in this service and in other coastal communities around the country. The next sort of new thing is natural organic reduction, and essentially human composting. The nation's first facility, Recompose, is open and operating in Seattle. The process involves placing the body in a container, that sort of pod thing you see, with wood chips and straw, adding consistent low heat and rotation. In a month's time, the body is transformed into a cubic yard of compost that you can collect from the facility or donate to a reforestation soil building project. And there aren't bones that remain in this process. It's soil. So here is a little more about the composting cycle. I think it's something that people are really interested in right now because it's a process that's been used with farm animals and for centuries, but we haven't really used it for people this way. And the idea was that especially in urban areas where space is a commodity, let's say. Having a way to turn our bodies into soil that isn't something that tree roots have to deal with ecological things from, but that really is soil building. So a single body creates a cubic yard. That's a huge amount. It's a pickup truck load of good compost. So the body goes, there's a laying in phase. The body goes into the vessel, becomes compost, and there's just this whole lovely thing that happens. I'm putting this here so that in the recording, or if any of you need to take a screenshot, or so that you know it exists, if you're interested in human, in natural, oh man, sorry, natural organic reduction. I want to call it recomposition, but that's their brand name. So natural organic reduction. This is a compost report on what human remains compost looks like chemically. Next, we're going to talk a little bit about green burial. I prefer to use the word conventional when I'm describing a burial with an embalmed body in a steel casket placed in the ground with a concrete vault. I use the word traditional burial when I am referring to burial practices of a specific faith, such as Jewish and Muslim communities and other communities that that don't engage in embalming and other processes and bury specifically in very simple containers or shrouds. Many traditional burials are natural. Conventional burials are usually not natural. There are lots of ways that we can go greener in our after-death care choices. And here is a good example of a cardboard coffin burial that the community and family have decorated. Green burial implies simplicity. All materials placed in the ground with the body are intentionally biodegradable so that the body and everything buried with it can decompose naturally to become one with the underground environment. Some people go as far as to use only vegetable inks when they decorate the coffin. There are no cement vaults or caskets with rubber gaskets and metal handles. Here is a burial with a wooden casket. A green burial grave is shallower in order, and usually I made this 4 feet under because it was sort of catchy and easy to say, but as Carol will tell you, it's 3.5 feet is the magic zone. A green burial grave is shallower in order to place the body in a more active microbial zone in the soil. There are specific green burial cemetery grounds, and they will give you guidelines to follow. And locally, there are private and municipal cemeteries where the practice of natural burial is allowed or has always been allowed. This is a shrouded burial. Sometimes a green burial involves just a shrouded body laid 3.5 feet underground. In this picture, the family is using a shroud tray. If you want to reduce what goes into the grave as much as possible, the tray is not necessary. There may be means of disposition, which I have left out here, and there may be newfangled things coming that we haven't even imagined yet. As always, the important thing is to talk about what you would prefer with the people who will be caring for your body after death, and to also make a plan B. Thank you all for listening. I know that I've been talking for a while now. And to close, I just want to offer you this, well, to close the slideshow, I just want to offer you this little whimsical bow of gratitude for our continued existence. Because until our last breath, we are all going about the business of living. And that is it for the slideshow. And I want to invite you all to stretch, because that was a lot of words. We can have a little stretch and then talk about your questions. I need to stretch.
So Dina, I have one question, and that is green burial legal in Massachusetts?
Yes, 100%.
And where are the local places where green burials are happening?
You want to check with your town. I think, in town cemeteries all over, we're starting to see cemetery commissions make specific rules, new rules for green burial and natural burial. Um, in Amherst, specifically at Wildwood, you can bury naturally there. I'm certain. Um, at the cemetery in Shutesbury, one of the cemetery, the West Cemetery in Shutesbury has a special area for green and natural burial. Leiden, the thing to really do is call and speak to, if you know the cemetery you want to be buried in, call and talk to them. If they have been having burials for people who are having Jewish or Muslim burials, they've always had natural burial. The thing you want to find out is, do they require you to have a cement vault? And that is why burial grounds are making specific sections for natural burial, because there aren't vaults used in the like in all of our old cemeteries. There's a lot of wavy earth to mow, and so the cement vaults in the ground have always only been for mowing over the ground. That is the purpose of the vaults.
So here's another question for you. A comment that Sunderland does allow green burial. The first one was about 2 years ago. And then, is natural organic reduction available locally?
That bill in front of the legislature now, I think the legislator who wrote it and filed it is from the Fitchburg Leominster area. I have corresponded with her, but I can't remember her name right now. Includes natural organic composting, so reduction. So we're working on it, and we'll keep working on it until we're successful. I don't think it'll take too long, because I think that's going to spread around the country pretty quick. The first question, Carol, are you here?
Yes.
Oh, good. Places I may have overlooked that where you can do a greener natural burial locally.
Wendell residents can have it in Wendell. You mentioned a lot of the ones that I know of. Chesterfield permits it. It's a higher plot fee for non-residents. There's one in Westfield. As you were saying, a lot of it is Warwick permits them. And a couple of those places I worked with and talked to the cemetery commission because somebody there wanted it. And a lot of it comes from people asking, requesting, bringing somebody in to speak. And then they decide, oh, we can do this.
Right. Right. Good.
Here's
Thank
another
you.
question for you from the chat is, do funeral homes work with families to coordinate green burial?
Well, Carol and I were talking about this earlier today and how to field this question. We wish they would more. Some do. It's kind of hard to tell who will. The green burial is not so much of a problem. Home funerals are a little more of a problem. What's happening is that as more people, more consumers, more families come to them and say, we really want to do this unusual thing, they are meeting the need, because what funeral directors want to do is meet the need. They can sell you less, but that's okay. I mean, you're allowed to bring your own coffin to the game anyway. So legally, and so I'm doing this clumsily. Carol, do you have more graceful things to say?
I can say that it depends on the funeral home. Some are more willing and some are less willing. I have had a funeral home say, we aren't a transportation service. I have also had a funeral home that is happy to provide transportation and to charge the handling fee and for the mileage.
Yeah.
And so, you know, it's probably more expensive than it would be if you drove your own vehicle, but they will do it for you. So again, I would say if that's something that you are interested in, planning ahead helps, and being willing to call around helps.
There's a question with a raised hand through the computer. Dr. Adele Smith Penny.
Please make it Adele. This is great, Carol and Dina. Thank you very, very much. I am hoping to go green burial and natural. Unfortunately, both my town cemetery and my faith community have a green cemetery. But if I am not able to get the less chemically, I don't know, if with cremation, if I cannot go the more natural route, will those plots allow me to put my ashes in a green cemetery?
Carol, do you know more about this than I do?
Hybrid cemeteries, which would be conventional cemeteries that have decided to permit some space for green burials, generally already do cremation burials or scatterings, and it's highly probable that they would permit burial of cremated remains. Exclusively green cemeteries vary on what kinds of rules they impose. Some don't want to have cremated remains at all, and some will.
That was my sense too.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. I want to
Dina,
tell you, yeah,
from the chat, I have a couple more questions for you.
sure.
Is it legal to bury a loved one on private land?
Yes, and you need to talk to the town first, to the Board of Health, to the and powers that be in your town and get permission. There is an issue with the deed. So because when you sell the property, you can't retain rights to come back and visit the cemetery. So in the long term, if you're hoping your family to will be able to go there and spend time having picnics with you, you have to consider that the subsequent owners of that property may not want you to come and picnic there. So there's I'm going to let Carol add on to what I'm saying, but there's or invite Carol to add on to what I'm saying. There are things to consider, but yes, you can.
An additional point to consider is that the state started does not have a carve out for home burials, and therefore considers any burial to be in a cemetery, and therefore is requiring people to form a cemetery corporation. And I have problems with that, but we have not persuaded them to change that. I'm not sure how closely communities in Western Massachusetts are following that. It's more of an Eastern Massachusetts thing, but if a Western Massachusetts Board of Health goes online to the state website, they're going to encounter that advice.
Okay, good to know.
And Dina, I'm sorry. were you going to continue, Carol? I didn't mean to jump in too quickly.
I think the one thing that the two things I would say, one is plan ahead. If you are wanting to do a home burial, plan ahead. And number two, talk to the town that you live in. It's the Board of Health that makes decisions about cemeteries and burials, and
Make friends.
sometimes towns have a set of rules to follow.
Yeah.
Another question for you from the chat. Can you give an estimate of the cost for the different choices?
Carol, I mean, my first thing is do your research. It changes place to place. Some of the options that I described today aren't available yet in Massachusetts, so I don't have local pricing for that.
Yeah.
The funeral homes have to make public their pricing, so and if you're looking for a cemetery plot, a green burial plot, or a natural burial plot, or a conventional burial plot, you need to call the cemetery directly and ask them about those costs. So it's hard for us to say, what something costs. I can tell you that the most recently person's body taken from their home where there was a home funeral and transported to the crematory, the cost was, I think, about $1,500, a little north or south of there.
Oh, no.
Just for transportation but for transportation and cremation. And that was with a funeral director that was willing to do just that job and be paid just for that one job, not for handling the body in any other way. Another time, a funeral director I was working with very kindly on the way to the crematory stopped so that the person's friend could carry them through the garden in a shroud to inform the bees before their body's disposition. So there are all sorts of things we can make happen if we ask. And this is what Carol and I were talking about earlier today before our meeting all together, which is that the funeral directors really do want to serve the families in their communities. And often when we're asking for something that's not traditional or conventional, they balk a little bit. But the truth is, the more that families in a community ask for natural and green resources and services, the more the funeral directors are going to say we need to show up for our families in this way. So as consumers, I think until this point we've sort of been told, no, you can't do that, and we're starting to say, why not? Let's. So it's up to us to ask, is my sense.
Dina, another question here in the chat. Are there consultants available to help families?
There are. I mean, that's I'm going to advertise for myself briefly. That's what I do. There are end-of-life doulas. There are end-of-life navigators like myself. There are home funeral guides. There's the Western Massachusetts Funeral Consumers Alliance. If you have any question about your rights as a funeral consumer, as a person who lives and dies, which makes you a funeral consumer in this country, start there with the Funeral Consumers Alliance. You can find them online too, and they'll have the local chapter, the Western Mass chapter will have, and the Eastern Mass chapter have state, sort of local to the state information, but there's a national group also. That's a great place to start for consumer information. There are people in my line of work who charge money. There are people in my line of work who charge no money. I work on a sliding scale. So yes, there are ways, more and more so, there are ways to find this information. But always start with the folks who are volunteering and putting information out there for us for free. I always start there because, like the Funeral Consumers Alliance, because these are my neighbors who have worked so hard to make information available to us. So
Can you share more details about how a body can be iced at home?
Carol, you want to do that?
I will in a minute. I'm putting contact information
I'll
in
start
the
and then you can.
chat.
So, yeah, oh, yeah, good, thank you.
For-
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Sing.
So for keeping a body cool at home, one thing is to have a room that can be isolated and you can close the door off, and that way if it's warm out, you can turn the AC on. You can, if it's cool out, you can just open the windows. That would keep the ambient temperature down. The important thing to start with is cooling the body directly. I have heard frozen peas suggested. I don't recommend that.
Gets
Yeah, or just plain ice, which I also don't recommend because it melts and gets kind of messy. A product that I do really recommend is called Techni Ice, which was developed for deep fishing, and it comes flat and dehydrated, but you rehydrate it and the little cells puff up and it's kind of a gel. And it's cold. It's colder than regular ice. You do need to have room in your freezer for kind of two rounds of it. So you can, it comes in fairly large sheets. You can cut them in half. You want some underneath the torso and some on top. You particularly want to and some under the head. You also want to cool and the neck. You want to cool down the brain.
Carol, you're breaking up a little bit, so I'm gonna just review that quickly for people. So the Techni Ice comes in the sheets I have in my house, and I keep some on hand. They're about 1 foot by 18 inches. These sheets, and I rehydrate them. They become very cold, and you place them in sort of critical places on the body, under the head, under the torso, and above the torso. Over the genitals, the juicy parts of us, to help cool things down, bring the body's temperature down. And you want to switch out a batch of these, 4 or 6 of these sheets, every 6 to 8 hours, depending on how cold the room is. So if you have 2 sets, you can alternate them. And what I found locally is that once the body's cooled, as long as the ambient room temperature is kept low with air conditioning or in wintertime open windows, the body stays pretty cool without a lot of work. And we used to use in home funerals, we used to use dry ice. It's dangerous to use. It off gases, it burns. The Techni Ice is this wonderful, food safe, reusable alternative. Is that too much information? You asked.
Elizabeth Fernandez O'Brien has a question, a raised hand.
Actually, it's just a quick comment, and that is in Zooms that I've done in the past, if everyone turns off their microphone, then the speaker doesn't break up as much. I don't know if that's possible for you, but if you are a listener, maybe you could just turn your microphone off.
And another question here is, could you review how the stones are made?
A little bit. I've actually, when I first heard about them, this company, they're in New Mexico. When I first heard about them, I called them up and they were still in, they hadn't really gone commercial yet. But I called them up to say, you know, is this toxic? What are you doing? And the story I got from them, I'm sorry, my cat is about to bomb us. The story I got from them is that they they got together with a scientist at Los Alamos Labs to develop this hardening agent that makes the cremated remains inert. I don't know a whole lot more about that. The pictures I've seen online, what they do is um, they send you a container for the cremated remains. You send the remains back to them. They work with one batch at a time to combine the cremated remains with this slurry and hardening agent, and they shape them into little. They're really lovely little different. You get a selection of very different size stones. Some of them are have little. They're lovely and very smooth. They feel kind of like porcelain, and but not glazed porcelain. And they bake them in the kiln, and then they send them back to you. And different people's remains come out slightly different colors. Nobody quite the same. And they do pets too. I wish I could tell you a lot more about their process. They didn't have one of those infographics on their page that let me sort of borrow it to show you. So I couldn't. I hope that answers enough of the question.
Dina, another question for you here. Have you heard of mushroom shrouds?
I love this question. Carol, are you laughing? Hope you're laughing, Carol. Carol has heard my rant on mushroom shrouds, and now I will share it with all of you. Here's the deal: the mushroom suit lady that you've all seen her TED talk was an artist with a concept, and she wore this very interesting suit onto stage that had nothing to do with something that would actually work. But it got a lot of interest, and so we've been talking about suits and mushroom shrouds ever since. I as a shroud maker was contacted by a little company in Italy who wanted to infuse my shrouds with their spore, and I told them I thought that was a bad idea. Here's the thing about the mushroom shrouds. First off, your body has a microbial environment, a microbial community that is active and robust. And there is nothing extra you need to be able to decompose. It's going to start and happen and progress all by itself. We do not need special ingredients. That's the first thing. The second thing is that mushroom spores, they they need the specific environment they love to thrive in. Not every spore will thrive in every soil condition. And so far, the kinds of mushroom spore hurry your decomposition products are not soil, uh, they're not designed to go into specific kinds of soil. It's just sort of one. And I think it's not a good use of your money. That is my personal opinion. That's what I have to say. You could paint yourself with anything. I mean, you could go out to the woods or to your favorite shiitake farm and rub all over the mycological magic happening in their logs and see if that will help you. I don't know. But I really think that it's just something extra. Like a gasket in a casket.
Okay.
Could I add something?
Of course.
It's been also my observation that a lot of ideas that people come up with to do something with bodies after death are developed by designers
Pods.
and artists and creative people who don't really have familiarity with dead bodies. And so they sound really great, and people say, "Oh, have you heard about this? This is wonderful." And I say, well, it sounds great, but yeah, the egg one is one of my favorites, which I can go into or not. And the mushroom suit also, I don't know that mushroom spores grow really well at 3.5 feet
Right.
underground. And they may or may not be local mushrooms. So
Thank
Or
you.
it could be the wrong time of year.
Yeah. I was just going to say the whole point of cooling the body is to prevent it from decomposing too quickly. So there really is no need to put something on it to cause it to decompose, because as you said, Dina, that's what it is going to do.
Exactly.
So if we just remember that, and that almost everybody's out to make a buck. And it's not really natural to be putting foreign mushrooms into our soil
Right.
at all.
Right. More questions, Sue?
No other questions in the chat, but I think, Carol, you have got to tell us about the egg now that you brought it up.
Oh, go, Carol. Talk about the egg.
well, it's not an egg per se. I should say it's the body is, there are these lovely drawings that you can find online. It was a couple of Italian designers who came up with this notion that if the body were in a fetal shape, it makes the shape of an egg and that it can be suspended and then deposited in a hole in the ground. And the trick is that most people don't die in a nice tight fetal position. So if they're flat, you've got to figure out some way to loosen all their joints in order to do that and get them inside of this bag that will retain an egg shape. And then you've got to figure out, having somebody flat is actually a pretty easy way to transport someone to a hole in the ground. But if you've got 150-pound egg that you need to suspend, now you need an arm to do it. Now you need a mechanism that has the arm, and you need a hole that will fit this egg-shaped thing rather than just a flat one. So it sounds like a lovely back to the earth fertility kind of thing, and the reality is that it's kind of silly, in my opinion.
Impractical.
Impractical.
Yeah.
Hello, I don't know, I can't get the hand up, so
You're
when
good.
it's my turn, could I be recognized?
Yes.
Hands.
Hi,
You
team.
have the floor.
So, so this is a lot of terrific information. Where do I start? I mean, in the sense of, there are a lot of ideas here. Some of them are appealing, some of them aren't. Eggs, I don't think so, and mushrooms, but a lot of appealing things. So the question is, where do I go for information? Who do I contact that can, run through things that are realistic for where I live and what's available in my area and so on. And Dana, you've been very good about, explaining, and you're a consultant and so on. So is that the best way to go, is just to get somebody and, while we are well and able to talk to that person and try and get a plan?
So, there's lots of ways to do this planning. I think the first thing to do, and the best place to start, is with a pencil and a piece of paper. It doesn't cost you anything. And give some thought, ask yourself some questions. What do I want to happen with my body? Do I want to be cremated? Do I want to be buried? Do I want to be buried in a in a do I want to be embalmed and buried in a conventional casket in a conventional way? Do I come from a faith tradition that has specific burial practices? Um, do I want something new? Do I want to move to Washington State so I can compost myself? Right? I mean, these are real personal decisions and thoughts. So, what is my feeling about that? It's good to ask what your family um, will support you. Because they're gonna have the job. Um, so, making sure they're on board with what your choices are is really important. Um, I think that again, the place to start is personally with pencil and paper. The next place to start is conversations with people you care about, and then yeah, you can do homework yourself about, if I decide I want a green burial and I happen to live in Shutesbury, I can do that here. I can plan ahead by purchasing a plot in that section of the cemetery and leaving instructions for my family to stick me there. Um, and so, you don't need a consultant to help you with that part. If you want one, people like me are available in the community. Again, there's also the Funeral Consumers Alliance, which has a lot of information. And there are other places and other tools. The Funeral Consumers Alliance has a publication called Before I Go, You Should Know, that is specific to funeral and end of life arrangements, and it's a workbook. There are a number of these products available right now. The organization Compassion and Choices has also a workbook for doing advanced directives and making your end of life choices really clear to the people that you leave behind. There's another more explicit, sort of more detailed publication, because it has a lot of banking information and stuff, called I'm Dead Now What. It's kind of a cheeky title to the book, but can be a really useful tool as you figure out, because these workbooks ask you questions that you may not be asking yourself. So those are all places to start. Also, I want to add to that list, which is people in your faith community. Um, a lot of faith communities have burial committees of one sort or another. They may call them different things, but if you're engaged actively in a faith community, find out who those people are and talk to them. They can help too.
Well, I have learned a whole lot, and I'm incredibly grateful to you and to Carol for taking time to share your knowledge with us. I want to give people a few more minutes. If there are, if anyone has a question, please unmute yourself and speak up. There's so many people here, I can't see everyone in the same screen, so I don't want to overlook anyone. Oh, here's a question. Any local funeral home businesses that are more user friendly?
Call me. My phone number's in
Yeah.
the chat.
Okay.
It really depends
Yeah.
on the situation, and um, there are, but call me, and
And I'm going to share a comment that someone sent just to me, but I won't use their name, so I feel like I can share this. This person said, 2 years ago, when my mother died, the cost of moving her from hospital to funeral home to be cremated and having her remains sent to Florida was $2,500, and this included a service at the funeral home. So if you're trying to figure out ballpark numbers of what certain things might cost around here, there's one scenario that you can tuck away. And now that I've said it out loud, it'll be in the recording as well.
The Here's the thing. All of us want to be greener in how we live and how we leave life too. And I think that the cost of burial can be really prohibitive for people. And cremation may not be, I really want to say this as a death educator, cremation may not be your greenest choice, but it also is sometimes the best choice. And I say this because I talk to people who feel badly about cremating, that they're not doing something greener. And until we figure it all out and make these things affordable and doable as communities, people need to do what makes most sense for them and find some other way to offset the cremation carbon footprint, because that's doable too.
Mhm, mhm.
Marie A has her hand up.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
I was just going to say that.
Hi, I had actually put a question for Dina, but you're too busy to look at it. So I'll just ask you this way. I got a postcard from this thing called, I think it's called like A Better Place. It's like some kind of
Oh,
a forest.
let me talk about this.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Ah. Oh, thank you. Okay. A Better Place Forest is a nationally growing venture capital financed arrangement whereby they lease forest lands and you can choose a tree to circle with ashes. That's their process. And then you have a GPS coordinate so you can find the spot again, because there's no grave marker there. And yes, this is a way to it is an option. It's there, and they're advertising very heavily. Again, they are venture capitalist funded and supported, but they are giving the impression that nothing else will happen to that land or to those trees, and it's not true. They're leasing, and those trees could get cut, and that land could get developed eventually. So they are, I think, making a less than reputable
Honest.
promise, but they're also making promises to towns, and cemetery commissions and planning boards and zoning boards are not doing their homework about this company because it sounds so good and like we don't have to do anything and blah blah blah. But I'm not happy about their practices with towns, with forests, or with families. And that's just my sense. And I'm very careful not to say negative stuff about anybody. I haven't liked Better Place Forest from the get-go. There's some weird, shady deed things happening. And there's a growing number of people in the green burial and alternative death care community who are becoming concerned about them.
Good to know.
I would just say buyer beware. And that may
And
be to say, but
we might add that since cremated remains are not ash and are not actually good for plants, what they're doing with the trees that you're supposedly saving. So I don't know that they've looked into that at all. They're certainly not addressing it in their information.
right.
Another question from the chat. Is it legal to scatter ashes in national and state parks?
Not.
Not that I know of.
And scattering ashes, I just read about this. If you're going to a body of water, you're supposed to go 2 miles out before you scatter any ashes. So, I mean, it makes sense. You don't want people swimming the next day and having, grandma washing up on them.
They're just they're not chemically great for the water. So if a lot of people are
Right.
putting ashes into a stream, there's a consequences to the local ecosystem.
They're
And-
also not great for the national parks. I read an article a while ago about how popular some particular area was, like in Yellowstone, and everybody was scattering remains there. And there were these great mounds of scattered cremated remains,
Wow.
some of them with recognizable bone fragments that, and I mean, they take up space and they don't break down. So they were saying, yes, it's public land, but you are supposed to get a permit. And it would, my recommendation would be to be much more discreet if you're going to scatter on any kind of public land. And better to do it on private land. That's an approved scattering ground.
Agreed. Anybody else? I want to thank everyone for being here today. I'm a little scattered because of um, complexities. And I am so grateful to have y'all pick my brain. Do it anytime. Um, my I have asked of Carol all the questions you have asked of both of us today over time. And Carol, thank you so much for joining us and being with us
You're
here
welcome.
today. I
Happy
do
to do
have
it.
one last little thing to say, which is the little piece of paper I just picked up off the floor. It came from up on a shelf, and it says to us, the purpose of life is exploration, adventure, learning, pleasure, and another step towards home. And in this way, of sharing information, and I want to say that for Village Neighbors and for Amherst Neighbors, in the spirit of the villages, we are walking one another home. So thank you for spending this time with us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been great. Thank you.
And we'll send a message out to the people who participated when the recording is available, so that you can share it with people who were unable to attend for any one of 100 logistical reasons, like life.
I'm going to stop recording.